Welcome to your very first tutorial on ancient Greece. And this is very exciting for me, going through all of the various topics about ancient Greece in the upcoming tutorials. And this is a result of many books and several classes that I've taken on this subject, ancient Greece. Now, we might ask the question, why Greece? Why talk about this 25 centuries later after classical Greece? And it's simply mind boggling, all of the gifts, and yes, I would call them gifts, that the ancient Greeks provided to Western civilization. We're talking about laws, we're talking about contributions to literally every subject that you can think of: music, art, literature, poetry, government, law, botany. I mean, so it's just endless. Philosophy, all of these things. But I think the single most important concept that the Greeks gave Western civilization and the rest of the world was this idea of freedom. And not only just an idea, but it was written into laws for the very first time, giving citizens, average citizens, the ability to participate in the political process. And this was very peculiar, very strange at this time to the rest of the world. We have to imagine that this is the first time anything had ever been done like this in human history. And it had to be bizarre and strange to all of the neighbors around Greece, especially in the eastern Mediterranean. If we look at the empires there, ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Near East, and the Persians, these are all empires that are controlled by a single perpetual ruler, a royal house that creates and codifies all of the laws and controls all of the empire's bureaucracies. It is not conducted by committee. It is not conducted by average citizens. They have no input. And so this is what really sets the ancient Greeks apart, not only from their contemporaries, but from many civilizations that even arose after the Greek flame had been long extinguished. And what that allowed the Greeks to do was, for the very first time, examine and question the natural world around them. And they did that through reason and observation, in which they were not interfered or threatened by a royal leader. And so that's really it. That's the most important fundamental concept that we can take away from ancient Greece. And of course, there's all the tragedies, Greek tragedies. Many of those tragedies were actually enacted in real life. Certainly Leonidas and his 300 come to mind in that respect. And we move on to such charismatic figures like Alexander the Great. So there's simply so much to examine and love about ancient Greece. So once again, this is an introductory video, and I'm just kind of setting the stage for all the future videos that we'll be going through. So let's flip to a map of Greece here, and to many of you this may be already very familiar. You have in the north here Macedonia, and directly to its east are the Thracians. These groups of people were seen by many Greek peoples in the south as semi-barbaric. Certainly they didn't think of themselves that way. They very much thought of themselves as Greeks. And if we move down here, we're in central Greece with Thessaly. And further south, of course, is Boeotia. And even further south in Attica is the famed city of Athens. And then if we move over here into the Peloponnesus, we have Sparta, and to its west are the Mycenaeans. And they were constantly fighting for about a century, maybe more, for control of the southern Peloponnesus. And in the east, in modern-day Turkey, we have the Ionian Greeks, who were tied culturally and traditionally to the Greeks in the mainland. So we're going to be covering here some of the epochs of ancient Greece that we will be going through in the future tutorials. The first time period is Mycenaean Greece, and this is a period that lasted approximately, and I use the word approximately because these dates are constantly scrutinized by scholars. Sometimes they revise them downwards or upwards. So the important point here is there's never an exact year or date that we can say this or that started, because we are dealing with time periods here that are 3,500 to 4,000 years ago. And there just are not a lot of written historical records on the Mycenaeans. But we can generally say that it started in 1600 BC and lasted as far, perhaps as far, as 1100 BC. The two major things going on in Mycenaean Greece is it's the Bronze Age, and this is characterized, of course, by tools and weapons that consist of bronze. And of course, this is Homer's Trojan War. There has been a lot of research done to prove that a lot of these cities do in fact exist, and we'll get into that in the next tutorial. Now, somewhere around 1200 BC, the Mycenaeans go out of existence. It's game over for them. Their flame burns out, and we do not know the exact cause. What we do know is this was a catastrophe that was felt around the Mediterranean. So you'll see the ancient Hittites, for example, will go out as well. The causes are not well known. Some people will point to a warlike people called the seafaring people. There might have been a natural plague. It might have been a natural invasion or some sort of currency collapse. But again, the reasons are not well understood. After the Mycenaean civilization is gone, we move into a period known as the Greek Dark Ages. And we know even less about the Greek Dark Ages than we do about Mycenaean Greece. The Greek Dark Ages are the beginnings of the early Iron Age. So we will see tools and weapons forged with iron. And that represents a technological advance. And this will spread throughout the Mediterranean. After the Greek Dark Ages comes a period that's known as Archaic Greece. And this is a time period that lasted roughly from 800 BC to 510 BC. Some people will put this up until the time of Leonidas around 480 BC. This had some major events. First, the Greek alphabet, which was invented during this time, probably borrowed from the Phoenicians to some extent. The Greeks during this period certainly had contact with the Phoenicians, who are the great traders of antiquity. And so everything kind of unspools from that time when the Greek alphabet is invented. Also during this period, we're starting to see the rise of the polis, which is the Greek city-state, the famed Greek city-state. A form of government that will spread throughout the Mediterranean. After this comes classical Greece, and this is the most talked about period during Greek history. It is certainly the most revered, and this is where several of the great figures in Greek history appear. This is the rise of Athens and Sparta. We have the epic Persian and Peloponnesian Wars. This sees Alexander the Great go on his marathon march through Persia. We have the three titanic philosophers in Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and the great historian Herodotus, who is often referred to as the grandfather of history. And of course, he writes about the Persian Wars and gives us an excellent documentary almost of the Persian Wars. After Alexander the Great dies, we enter a period known as Hellenistic Greece. And this is roughly between 323, well, not roughly, that's from 323 BC to 168 BC. And what we see here is that Alexander's empire is carved up into a series of competing states. And what this results in is a gradual decline of Greece as a military power and the rise of Rome. And these two will compete for control. Eventually, Rome wins, and we move into the period known as Roman Greece. And this is sort of a blending of the two cultures, which is commonly referred to as the Greco-Roman culture. And even though the Greeks are no longer a player on the military scene, they still have a huge amount of influence on Western civilization, Rome, and the Mediterranean through many other non-military contributions, and you know many of those already. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I will see you guys in the next video, and we will get started with Mycenaean Greece and what they were all about.